meaning something that is currently in the news. Again, for example, there's a big announcement, oh no, there's lead in the city's water, and then boom, you put out a press release saying my campaign is going to take care of this, and if you're lucky, then you'll get a quote in all the stories about lead in the water. Include your contact info so that they can follow up with you. Maybe they want to interview you. And the press releases should answer succinctly. And it shouldn't take a lot of time to read to figure out what it's about. You should just say who, what, where, when, and why. And if they want more information, make sure they can contact you to get it. So in your press release, you want to include a quote that you would like to see in the story. And make sure not to put too many quotes in there. And make sure that every quote can stand on its own. Because sometimes they like to take a quote out of context that can make you look sort of goofy. So make sure that every quote is solid. Maybe only put one or two in there. For press conferences and other events, send a press release immediately afterward and think of it as a cheat sheet for journalists who weren't there. So even if they didn't make it to your press conference, they can still write the story as if they were there. You've got press advisories, which is a similar thing, but this is to notify the media about events before they happen. They're shorter. So for example, before your campaign announcement, send a press advisory to get journalists to come. Then immediately after the announcement, send a press release, which is longer, and that is to shape the story for journalists, whether they were there or not. So again, these are shorter and have just the facts. Don't give away the whole message, because again, you want to get them curious enough to come and to actually cover your announcement. So press conference is an event where you speak and then take questions from journalists. It can be difficult to get journalists to show up to these. So try making calls to some likely prospects. If you know people in the local press, that's great. Even if you don't know them, call the local journalists who cover the politics beat and try to get them to come to your announcement. Anticipate questions that you're going to get and prepare answers. Again, your answers should be short, succinct, nice and sweet. You don't want to be rambling about a question that you weren't prepared for at your press conference. And it can be a great thing to have visuals at a press conference. For example, go to a closing factory to talk about the need for jobs, or go to a polluted lake to talk about environmental protection. And here you see a picture about with some Greens who are dressed in sort of construction gear. They're talking about proposed demolition of their neighborhood. And it looks a lot better than just a person standing in a conference room reading from a presentation. You can also bring other speakers to add interest for the press. So for example, hold a press conference with someone who's affected by police brutality or unfair marijuana laws when we're talking about criminal justice reform. Or if you have high-profile supporters or surrogates, that can make for a really interesting press conference that is really going to pull in a lot of media. Letters to the editor were mentioned before. This is actually one of the most read sections of most newspapers. So a letter to the editor can be from the candidate, or it can be from supporters about the campaign. Both are great, and it's a good way to get attention and show support for your campaign. I mean, really, one letter can reach thousands, tens of thousands of people in your district. Then there's paid media, advertising. So you can consider advertising ways that could help you reach your target audience. So for example, print media like newspapers and weeklies, TV and radio, these are usually more expensive, and part of that is it requires audio and video production. But sometimes it can be worth it. It can really put you over the top. Online ads are typically less expensive, and they can be tailored to your budget and targeted to reach your audience. And of course, you always want to think about what's your audience. You don't want to advertise in a oil company trade magazine if your message is a Green New Deal to shut down fossil fuels. All right, so we talked a little bit about some of the communications. Now let's talk about community engagement. So we're talking events, forums, debates, questionnaires, endorsements. So one campaign event that's popular is the meet and greet. Your main goal here is to introduce your campaign to new people, identify and recruit supporters and volunteers. Especially for local campaigns, these are really important because it's a chance to network and identify the people who are going to be part of your team. So house parties are popular at the candidate's house or maybe at a supporter's house where they can invite all their friends. Or you can hold it at a local venue, your favorite neighborhood bar or restaurant. And then similar is the fundraiser, except here the main goal is a little different. You want to raise money for the campaign. And you should create the expectation beforehand that you'll be asking for money. So people will come prepared to give and wanting to give, and then when they see other people giving, they will also then be inspired to give. And you can even have rallies, which are high energy events with speakers, sometimes music. A lot of times these are for larger campaigns that travel a lot. Rallies can build excitement and momentum. They can convert supporters into volunteers, donors. It's all about moving people up the ladder of engagement. And really all of these events are. And what that means is to start with people who don't know about your campaign, then they know, then they're a supporter, then they're a donor, now they're a volunteer, then they become a core member of your team. And you're always trying to move people up the ladder of engagement with everything that you do. And then we have candidate forums. So these are usually hosted by community groups or media. And sometimes they'll focus on issues. So if you find out what the main issues are, then you can do your homework before the forum and show people that you know your stuff. Anticipate questions that'll come up, including questions that are specific to your campaign and your positions, possible criticisms. Be prepared to answer those. And always at a forum or debate, when someone asks you a question, make sure to answer that question before you move to other points. Otherwise, you'll create the impression that you're ducking the question, and that doesn't look good. So a debate is slightly different because candidates engage each other more directly. There's usually more back and forth, and the stakes can feel a little bit higher and challenge each other on their platform, on their record, on statements that they've made. Here it's especially important to listen to what your opponents say so that you can respond. Don't just be thinking about what you're going to say, but listen to what they're saying. Because, again, it's higher stakes, but there are also big opportunities, especially for a challenger who gets into a debate. If you can call out your opponent and say, wait, you just said that, but last week you voted for the opposite. That can be a huge turning point. And you need to get invited to these events. So start by finding out what forums and debates are planned. Make your campaign known to them, to the organizers, so that they can invite you. Sometimes you won't get invited when other candidates do. So then what you should do when that happens is contact the event organizers and ask them to invite you. And oftentimes they will apologize and say, yes, of course you're invited. Sometimes they won't do that. And they excluded you intentionally, oftentimes because these groups might be affiliated with the political establishment. So when that happens, consider taking action to highlight that they're excluding voices from the debate, that they're trying to silence people who are participating in democracy. So you can pick at the event, try to get the press to pay attention to the fact that it's not a real debate. You can launch a letter to the editor campaign, targeting that debate, maybe expressing your disappointment with the organization that organized it, etc. And some people even take more drastic actions when they're excluded from debates, and just consider what's right for your campaign. And there are other community events too. So sometimes there are events with a social or political focus, like Martin Luther King Day celebrations, Earth Day marches. There are really a lot of these. I mean, in many of our communities, there are multiple sort of activist events every day. So there's quite a lot to choose from. So you should attend, first of all, to show support for their causes. And you can also contact the organizers to ask if candidates are allowed to speak. Oftentimes, if they allow any candidates to speak, then they have to allow all candidates to speak. And sometimes there are spontaneous actions, protests, demonstrations. For example, pipeline protests. If there's a killing by the police, there might be marches in response to it. So again, attend, first of all, to show support. And try to connect with organizers. Let them know that you're a candidate who wants to speak in support of their cause. And this can be a really good way to connect with activists and to get your campaign in the news. So another way to engage with organizations is by answering their questionnaires. They often send out questionnaires to inform the public or just inform their members about candidates and where they stand. So you should try to respond to these unless the organization clearly stands against your values, in which case you don't want to spend much time trying to win them over. But there's some really important ones. For example, the League of Women Voters questionnaire, which often goes out to the whole public. It's very important that you respond on time and that you make sure that you're included in that. And when you do these, save the responses, because they can be useful for answering other questionnaires. You might want to add them to your platform. You might use those responses later at a forum or debate. And then some organizations endorse candidates. So reach out to like-minded organizations, find out if they endorse candidates, find out what the process is. Usually it starts with a questionnaire and then moves to an interview. Look for endorsements from influencers in your community, like current and former elected officials, movement leaders, neighbors and friends. And for a local race, try to get endorsements from as many neighbors as you can. Business owners in your community. Sometimes you might know a cool band or something like that. Get their endorsement. When you get endorsements, first of all, show them off to demonstrate the support that you're getting. Also ask them, are there any resources that they can provide to endorse candidates? Volunteers, financial resources, that sort of thing. All right, and that brings us to the ground game. So we're talking about canvassing, phone banking, lit drops, tabling, flyering, visibility, get out the vote. The goal of the ground game, everything you do should be aimed at persuading, identifying, recruiting supporters, and moving them up the ladder of engagement. Again, where they start, they're unaware of the campaign, then they're aware, then they become a supporter, then a donor, a volunteer, and finally a team member. So canvassing is defined as systematic initiation of direct contact with individuals. There are two basic types, door canvassing and street canvassing. And here we see door canvassing, where you go knock on doors and talk to people in their homes. Door canvassing takes a good amount of time and energy, but it can be really invaluable. A lot of local races are based, door canvassing is one of the essential elements.
you can reach voters directly, and in a local campaign, again, the candidate themselves can reach a significant percentage of the voters right at their doors. And people appreciate talking to the candidate. But it is fine to have volunteers do door canvassing as well, especially in larger campaigns where it's unrealistic for the candidate to knock on everyone's door. And when you're canvassing, you can listen to voters' concerns and ideas, you can gauge their reactions to your message, and you can find out what excites them most. So, canvassing is to identify potential supporters and volunteers, and of course, ask them to sign up to be contacted. Some of them will want to sign up, put down their email address so that you can follow up with them, put down their phone number so you can follow up. Even if they don't, you want to be gathering data on them so that you can get out the vote later. Maybe they don't want to sign up for whatever reason, but you're still pretty sure that they're going to support you. So you can put them down as, yeah, a supporter or a likely supporter. And if you don't find anyone home, you should have a door card with the info about your campaign. Let them know that the candidate came to their door. They weren't home, but you care enough to give them a little visit. And you might want to have a voter list to know which addresses to target to reach likely voters. Because some people have voted a lot, they're more likely to vote than others. And again, you've got limited time and resources, so sometimes you want to target those people who are most likely to vote.
Excuse me, can you take a break for a minute? I need to change the batteries in that microphone.
Oh, yes. All right, probably this one.
Yeah. Okay, stick that back in there. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So are we all good with the microphones now? Okay. Sorry about the interruption. Hopefully the microphones are all good now. All right, so aside from door canvassing, the other basic type is called street canvassing, where you speak with people directly on busy streets, at farmers markets, at block parties. So you should have a short pitch and an ask ready, because people generally aren't willing to spend as much time as they are at their door. They're out there to buy some fresh organic cucumbers. They're willing to give you a minute, but they've got things to do. So, but street canvassing is a very good way to make your campaign visible in your community, because you have canvassers at the farmers market. Lots of people are going to see them and say, hey, who's this dynamic candidate who's all over the farmers markets? So with street canvassing, it is a good way to reach a large number of people in a short period of time, because if you choose your spot right, you're going to reach a lot more people faster than at their doors. So if you're gathering signatures to get on the ballot, for example, or if you're promoting a large-scale campaign, like a campaign for mayor or larger, usually that can be a great way to meet a lot of people who are in your district. But street canvassing does take a lot of energy and motivation, so don't just send volunteers out there alone. Make sure that they have orientation, use a buddy system with frequent check-ins, because some people can go out by themselves with a clipboard and gather 500 signatures in an afternoon. Other people, it's their first time, and they might do 20 and say, like, okay, that's enough for me for now. So again, it's just about knowing your people and taking care of your volunteers. Lit dropping means distributing literature at every household in a certain district. Again, it's got a similar effect to mailing, but it can save money because you're not spending so much on postage costs. So all that you have to do is divide up your district into walkable routes for your volunteers, give them literature, give them a map, and you've got yourself a lit drop. Tabling is when you set up an information table with literature, sign-up sheets, Usually these are events like, again, farmers markets, festivals, conferences. And tables can also serve as a base for canvassers. So, for example, you can have a table at the farmers market so people can stop by for a nice leisurely conversation. And you can also have canvassers who are going out and working the crowd, and then they'll come back to the table, take a break for a little bit. And that can be a pretty good system for a lot of these events. Flyering and postering is where you're either distributing literature directly to people as flyers, or you're sort of posting it up on billboards and in high traffic spaces like coffee shops, whether it's posters or little handbills that people can take with them. So this can be useful for promoting those large-scale campaigns and just getting a lot of people to see your materials. Or sometimes you want to promote an event to a targeted audience. Like you have a big rally next week, and there's a medical marijuana march or something, so you want to go out and get a flyer in everyone's hands. Visibility actions are about making your campaign's presence visible in your community. And you want to, first of all, build your name recognition, show that you have support, and pique people's curiosity so that they want to learn more about your campaign and see, why are people supporting this person? So the most basic one that a lot of people do is just hold signs by the side of a busy road. The old wave and honk. Also, ask supporters to put up yard signs, stickers, to wear buttons, just, even just to get your name around in the community. And we say, be seen being green. Because greens are out there all the time doing awesome stuff. Sometimes people don't know that it's greens who are doing this good work. So, for example, if you're standing with working people against a corporate-controlled government, bring along your Green Party swag. Then we have phone banking, which is what it sounds like. You're contacting voters directly by phone. You have a call list. And these phone calls allow for direct conversations. And generally what we find is that older people appreciate having a conversation on the phone, although many people these days don't pick up the phone. So you might find yourself leaving a lot of voicemails, and that's okay. You're still reaching a lot of people. And you can find apps that make phone banking easier, including some nation builder tools, which is a software that we use and a lot of Green parties use. And then there's text banking, similar, but you're sending out text messages instead of calls. And texts have a very high rate of opening and reading them. In some studies, about 99% of texts get read. And younger people, especially, are much more likely to check a text than to take a call. And another advantage, you can reach more people faster than by calling them. And your text should give people a way to get involved. For example, it should say, respond to this number if you want to volunteer. There are some downsides, though. For example, it's less personal than a phone call, and not all phones are able to receive texts. So we're getting towards the end here of getting the message out. As you've seen, there are a lot of different ways, but it's very important. After you've done all this, you're leading up to your Gotv Drive, which stands for Get Out the Vote. And it's about working to turn out the voters that you've identified as likely to vote for you. And, of course, get them to bring friends. In the lead up to Election Day, you want to use your tools for getting out the message to start getting out the vote, such as email, social media, mail and lit drops, phone and text banking, the entire ground game. And make sure that your strategy accounts for early voting. More and more people are voting early. So if you start Gotv on Election Day or the weekend before Election Day, you're starting well behind your opponents. And you want to get as many volunteers as you can to commit to work on Election Day and ask them early. Basically, if you can, ask them as soon as they join your team. And you've got a committed volunteer. Because there are a lot of roles to fill. You have poll workers who hand out literature at the polls. You've got phone bankers who call the supporters you've identified to get them to turn out and vote. Poll watchers can find out which supporters have already voted and which you still need to get to the polls. And I'll just mention here that there are laws regulating all these activities. So you really need to find out what your state's laws are, sometimes what your local laws are. But typically, this get out the vote activity is very common. And sometimes all you need is just a simple certification that, yes, we're going to be working the polls on Election Day. And you also want to have circuit riders, especially in a larger district, who go from poll to poll in a big circuit to make sure that all the polls are covered and everything is going smoothly. They can give people rides to the polls, and they can bring snacks to the poll workers and poll watchers. If needed, you can take poll workers from this poll where we're covered to another one where we need more people. And if you have all of these roles filled, the poll workers, poll watchers, phone bankers, circuit riders, then you still have more volunteers, have them do visibility in key locations. Again, go to the main intersection and do a honk and wave to remind people to go and vote for your campaign. And obviously, this is about persuading enough likely supporters to turn out to vote that you can reach that win number that you've set. So you want to be contacting them throughout the day to remind them to vote. And as I already said, it's not just Election Day. It's weeks before Election Day. You want to make sure you start before early voting. And especially if you're running a down ballot campaign, you can benefit greatly from having poll workers. The reason is most people, when they go to vote, they know who they're going to vote for at the top of the ticket. A lot of times they don't know all the candidates who are running down ballot. So if you hand out a piece of literature to them that impresses them while they're waiting in line to vote, then you can significantly bump up the numbers that you're getting. And again, you may want to offer rides to the polls, especially depending on what your district looks like. And if you've reached all your likely supporters, then you can start calling undecided voters, try to give them a last persuasive call. And that is a somewhat conclusive presentation on how to get your message out and get out the vote. So, do we have time for a few questions? I feel like we covered a lot of territory. Datsa? Sorry, do we have time for a few questions?
We should probably have some questions because this was a lot of information.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so yeah, let's take a few questions right over here.
Yes, also agreed, a lot of information. So I'm going to go back to something way back.
Okay.
You're talking about press conferences.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that sometimes it's oftentimes difficult to get reporters and journalists to attend the press conferences. In your experience, why is that the case?
Okay, really great question. Why is it difficult to get journalists to attend press conferences? And the short answer is that journalists are overworked and overwhelmed, and this could go into a very long answer about sort of problems with the media in this country. But I think basically some very good advice is assume that journalists are busy and that they're lazy. So you have to hand them the story on a platter and sometimes bug them to run with it. So yeah, a lot of times they'll say, oh, another candidate for local office, big deal. No one cares about that. What's the president tweeting about? Or, everyone knows how stupid the news has gotten. There tends to be not very much coverage of substantial issues, local campaigns, that sort of thing. But if you do that groundwork, if you make yourself known to the media, if you bug them, if you call them, run into them at a protest and say, oh, hey, it's me, I'm a candidate, let's talk, then eventually you're going to start getting some news. I mean, you just have to be persistent. Again, it's sort of like, don't just put up issues on a website and expect people to flock to your campaign. You have to bring the message to them. It's the same with the media.
A good tip that I've heard with regard to getting the press to the press conference is to address something that they're already covering. Like, if the news of the day is Foxconn, we're going to talk about Foxconn. Or if the news of the day is, something that they're talking about at City Hall, you say you're going to address that issue. If you can tie it to an issue that they're already covering, then they're much more likely to come.
Yeah, that's a totally great point. And again, we talked a little bit about you're much more likely to get covered if it's pegged to something that's in the news, which people actually refer to as a news peg. If you say, I really care about this issue, this should be the #1 story, it's unlikely to get covered. But if you jump into the debate on the hot story that's happening right now, you're much more likely to get interest and coverage.
Short one. Is there an app or a computer site for text banking?
Yes. Great question. There are many apps that can help you with phone banking, text banking, that sort of thing. So the honest truth is that my experience is more in developing the message than in getting the message out. So there are people who know a lot more than me in the Green Party about the best app for text banking, the best app for phone banking, and that sort of thing. But generally, you can find apps to help with a lot of these different processes, and yeah, some of them are even free or affordable enough that we can use them.
To your point about getting the attention of the media, David, great presentation.
Thanks, George.
And you talked about earned media. There's a real important aspect of earned media, especially if it comes to releases and events. And that is getting that release 7 to 10 days out before the event. And what is a good practice is on Monday of the week of the event in the afternoon, when they're not in a bunch of meetings or anything, to call to say, did you get our media release? And I like to use media as opposed to press because it's really shifted. Did you get our media release? And then naturally they've got to go look and see if they've got it, if it's categorized, and say, oh, thanks, I'm glad, we're looking forward to you covering it. Most importantly, the day of the event. And on my phone, I have media listed in all the stations and radio stations that I would normally contact, so I can go boom, boom, boom. But at 8:45 on the day of the event, at 9 o'clock they have their media meeting, and they're going to decide, reaffirm what they're going to cover that day. That's our chance to get another hit in and say, oh, this is so important, I hope you're going to cover it. Are you going to cover it? Just ask him. And if they waddle or this, or there's going to be a snowstorm, well, please do that. But then the next time you got one out, and this is key because it's building a relationship. And you catch these names, and the next time you come out, say, hey, Joe, you missed us the last time. Make them feel a little guilty. But again, this is kind of a long-term relationship in terms of earning that and having them to get to cover your stuff. Thank you.
Thanks, George. All right. Not seeing any more burning questions. Why don't we keep it moving? What do we have next? All right. Microphones all good? streaming and one for video.
We got another pocket, thank you. While we're sitting up there, can you hear me okay? Let's get a little stretch in here. And my partner, Julianne Enslow, sends her regards. She was our co-chair in 2000 during the Nader campaign. And beginning then, and at every one of our national events coming out of Milwaukee, we've done something called our Green Party Call to Action. I'd like for you to join me in this. Okay, so please stand and repeat after me. We believe in independent alternative politics. We believe in moving people and communities. We believe in giving hope and a call to action. Go green. Go green. Go green. Thank you. Thanks for putting up with me.
Always asking for one more thing.
She's old. All right. Are we up there? Where's everybody from? I know you. Where are you from?
Milwaukee area.
Okay.
I'm from Illinois.
Also Milwaukee.
Okay.
Waterford.
All right.
Also Illinois.
Okay, cool.
Milwaukee.
Hey, Tom.
There we go. We're closing in.
All right, all right. Down. Yeah. Is this the switch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Is there one? You've heard this before. Money is the root of all evil. In for a dime, in for a dollar. A fool and his money are soon parted. Money doesn't grow on trees. I want money, that's what I want. Get it out of the way. And money is the mother's milk of politics. Let's be honest right now. Who here likes asking somebody for money? We've got unanimity there. Yeah. You know, and it's really inspiration for the uninspired. And we want to change that in terms of, you know, how to like asking for money. So think about this. When you're given the opportunity to give money to something that you really feel good about, that you really want to happen, how do you feel when you give that money? Feel good, right? Come on, shake your head if you know what I'm talking about. You feel good about that. And so we got to begin to reverse it and think about giving the opportunity to people to give money and feel good. That's positive. So how do we do that? How do we get used to that? You know, while he's getting there, we're going to talk about some targeting. But, you know, on the realistic side, I'm a baby boomer. And the wealth of our country is upwards into baby boomers. And I'm just throwing some general targeting things out. And that women control the money in our country. Real. Real. And that women are more sympathetic to human needs. These are some generalities, but they're the truth. And they're the truth that professional fundraisers and others do as they go after family foundations. That doesn't apply to what we're talking here. But that's the concept in terms of some of the things, in terms of who do we really focus on and concentrate, and we're going to get there in a bit. Maybe I can help speed this up and grab something here. So just as a follow-up on that, and until we get that going, I'm going to move ahead in terms of the windows. And the issue of fundraising strategy, because that's kind of what I started to get into in terms of targeting. Here we go. And it comes down to who are we asking? First of all, I want to be clear that this PowerPoint is on fundraising in general. So we need to apply it to the parameters of candidates as we go along. But, you know, who's our target market? You know, who's the messenger? Who's going to do the talking? What tools do we have? What's the message? Dave did a good job of talking about that message. But that's one of the key things, you know, because that message is inherent in media, but it's inherent in fundraising. And real important to be able to do that and do that precisely. How we're going to get it done, infrastructure, benchmarks, items, you know, that's all natural in the strategy. And Dots is going to talk about tools next. And it's a lot of things that we've talked about that we all get. If we took turns going around the room, we'd hit 90% of this. You know, and the only things that aren't there are foundations and corporations, and that's where we come into the PAC world too. And that hopefully is a reality on our end in the future. So what is key? And where I want to spend some time, Damien, you kind of sit here, but if you could get down here a little bit.
More?
Up. We're skipping all that. We're going up. Yeah. Down, then down. I'm sorry.
The other up, huh?
The other up, down, yeah. There, right there. That's what I want. I want the bullseye. That one. Mapping prospects. This is the most important slide on here. Mapping prospects, donor self-interest. We go to the middle here to to the bullseye and work out. To the middle is the strength in terms of least time and least resources. Then as we work out, it involves more time and resources. So the middle bullseye, that's the personal end. That's really where the people who believe in you the most are. That's your advisors, that's your family, that's your board, that's your relative. And that's going to be the place to start raising money and be the most effective and the quickest. And we can't deny that, so just understand that as we look at how we move out. This second one, we talked about the personal, and the second one, we've got power and money. Do you have something that this person wants? And what is that something in terms of you being a candidate? As we look to the next one in terms of ideology, this is the next layer of targeting. And that's those people who have a values match with you. They believe in saving the earth. They believe in getting rid of corruption, And so those folks are the next level in terms of ideology who would be targeted. And the outside realm is the enemy of the enemy. Who you're running against, who doesn't like him too. Who wants him out of office. And that's a valid area to take a look at in terms of who the enemy is. And again, as we go from the center to the outside, no matter how we're doing it, it's going to take more time and resources. Next is donor self-interest. One back.
More bear?
No, keep there. Oh, we're missing one, but let's stay there. Well, I don't know what we're missing there. So donor self-interest. Again, that core is family and friends. That next layer is power. Who gets financial benefit out of your office? Does the union get a better contract? Who gains from what you want to do? And also that second layer is political benefit. The third layer, the ideological, has to do with who shares your issue, your value, who shares the same cause, who's part of your organization, your state party, your local party. And again, the fourth one is the enemy of my enemy. In terms of an issue, a cause, organization, individual, even if it's personal. That's someone who may or will support you. So the next important thing is making the connections. And looking at who that prospect is within those layers and who you know who knows them. That's real important. So if within that first section, Mary's Moneyworth is in the bullseye there, and you've got a board member who's a friend of hers, that's the connection. You want to meet with her with that board member. And so as we go through this, it's kind of looking at people's issues and what you know, and who do they tie in that's a part of your group that can be part. And here we're talking more so in terms of that personal visit. Next. There was one before that in terms of message. And Dave did a good job on messaging, and messaging can get very complex. But when we're talking about donor visits or messaging at events, and also especially if we're dealing with people who aren't tight with us, we really need to, one, within all that, state the benefit of why you want me in office, why I want to be in office, and to state that benefit. Secondly, to make it viable. You know, I've got the support of so-and-so and so-and-so. I've worked in housing issues in this community, and we need progress there. And third is the ask. And we'll get to that, okay? But as we talk about those first 2 points and the kinds of things that Dave was talking about, I really advise that you take the time to write down everything that you want to say. Take the time to do that. Look at it. Take a good look at it. Then cut it in half. You know, take the redundancy out. Put it in good sequence. Take a good look at it. And cut it in half again. And we're working toward an elevator speech. But when we're talking about personal visits or public presentations, you got 1 minute, you got 3 to 5 minutes. And you don't want to waste that time by being redundant. You want to educate people on your platform and your message in a good sequence. Like Dave said, you want to say what it is in the beginning. At the end, you want to say what it is. And you want to get some viability. But you got to work that messaging out. And so that's the work in all of this. It's to throw everything up against the wall. And then get it down to 60 seconds. And if you can do that, then when it gets expanded and that possible donor or someone in the audience asks this question, you've already wrote everything you thought about that and you're ready to answer it, you know, because you put it in some kind of framework. So again, to me, the work is really there in crafting that message. Secondly, and this was brought up before with Dave, start where people are. Start where people are. If someone is concerned about education, and you know they try to find out ahead of time, you know, then that's the beginning of where we start in this conversation. And it begins with an open question. How do you feel about these charter schools today? Our platform is the other way. But if you know they're against them, start with that question. Let them talk. Engage them. Have a conversation with them. Get them to like you. But to find that and make this one of, I'm not talking heads, I'm going point 1, 2, 3. You want to go this back and forth in terms of having them be a part of this. You know, we're not talking about the fact that we need money. We're talking about the fact of what we're doing, what our message is, what our platform is. We want to keep it short. And that's where it comes to, excuse me, bringing it down. And we want to speak from our heart and with passion. So as it's teamed up, it may be a candidate and another volunteer. However that goes, you need to talk about these roles ahead of time. It gets sometimes a little bit convoluted. But again, it's important. Give it some rhythm. Next one is the case statement, and Dave talked about this. Why should you give me the money? What problem am I working on? What solution do I have? What's unique about my candidacy? What do I have to sell? How will the world be different? How will my community be different? How will my neighborhood be different in terms of what I would like to do? Why you, why now? Here we get to the tough part, and back it up one time. This is ask for a specific amount. And we don't have the time. But within your team, you need to sit down and practice. And give it that 3-minute drill. Give that 3-minute drill and say, Eric, will you write me a check for $300 today? Listen to me. We have to get it to that point. Whatever is predetermined ahead of time, and do not judge the capability of your donor. Don't ever do that. Let them make that decision. And when you make that ask, you stop. You don't apologize. You get a big pregnant pause out there. You let the air get still. And you let them think. And oftentimes it'll surprise you to say, yes, I can. Sometimes it'll be, I'm selling my house and it should be sold next week. And I'll do what I can. Well, I can't give you $300, but I can give you $200. Thank you. You know, literally. You know, well, times are down on me, but I got this friend, you know, and she's really a hawk on education. Maybe we should talk to her. all kinds of things can come out of that. But when you ask for that money, stop right then and there. And put it on them. That's not any way cool, but that's really what happens and how it gets done. Am I making sense? Yeah. And you need to practice that. That's the thing that people are scared to do it. I want to remind you, we're giving somebody an opportunity to give money to something that they like and will make them feel good. And so you have to have that positive feeling all through this, whether it's a one-on-one meeting, whether it's a presentation to a larger group. You got to be able to put that out there in that fashion. And I want to talk about the amount of money. I remember early on in my work in the Green Party, in probably 2001 National Convention, David Cobb was doing the money pitch. And there might have been 500 people in the room. And David Cobb came out and said, and David Cobb's our former presidential candidate who was nominated right here in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 2004. David Cobb came out and said, you know, who's going to give us $1,000 today? After he went through the position, why it was unique, what we need to do, and then came where they asked, who's going to give us $1,000 today? And I went, oh, this is new. This is new. And then another friend of mine said, I will. And another guy I knew said, I will. And then a woman said, I will. And it was like, whoa, there's a little magic here. You know, so I learned how to do that. And you agree ahead of time to drop it down. Well, thank you all. But who can give us $500 now? And work the room on that. And keep breaking it down. And that's good in a larger situation, especially in terms of how you set it up. You know, I remember in terms of that amount of money, when I first became a program director of Peace Action, and we had our Lanterns for Peace event, usually 300-400 people at that time. We had a large organization. And I was going to do a money pitch, and I said to Julie, I'm going to ask for $1,000. And Julie said, you can't do that. Our people don't have that kind of money. And I said, well, I looked over our donors, and I went to one of them, Chris, and Chris had already gave $800 that year. And there was still four months left of the year. And I said, Chris, can you help me? I am going to ask very directly to the crowd, and with a bunch of kids around me in terms of the future, who's going to give us $1,000? Can you give us $200 more so I can set this up right before the end of the year? Chris said, yeah. It went, before Chris could get up and say, yeah, somebody else jumped up. We had 5 people give $1,000 that night. That just blew it out of the water. You know, so don't make that decision, then break it down. Then break it down. I remember at a fundraising event at the Islamic Center, and they were funding getting a license for a film about Palestine that they had to get in terms of movie distribution. And a friend of mine, Janan, stood up and said, lock the doors. Humor is good here. Nobody gets out of here till we raise $25,000. And they went at it, but humor is an important thing. And then I'll end with this, and it's my favorite short pitch. And I use it for raising money for theater groups or for big events. And actually, Julie Inspo wrote this one. And it comes down to, we got good news and we got bad news. And I said, what's he talking about? You know, I'll tell you the bad news is it takes money to run a campaign. The bad news is we need to print materials. We need to buy airtime. And the good news is that you got money in your pocket right now. And we get a laugh. We get a laugh. You got money in your pocket right now. We keep getting that laugh. We take credit cards. We'll take anything you got. And as it's going around and comes back, and Joe Rody, an old socialist, told me this one. You shake the hat, you shake whatever. I don't hear any change in here. We need everything. We send this back around. We want every coin in your pocket. Don't worry about it. There's an ATM machine on the way home. And get another laugh. But be creative that way. And again, make it fun to say, I'm giving money. Thank you. Peace and love.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Come back for the microphone.
I wasn't taking it home. I've got my own.
We're gonna be all choked up about it. Got that one, got that one. Pocket there. There you go. Thank you. Going with different products. Let's see here.
Put that one
You got
there.
that one, that one.
All right, so quickly, I'm not going to go back on the PowerPoint. I just want to say that there are numerous mechanisms for raising cash. There is your website, there is the Facebook, there is crowdsourcing, there is national, there are email lists, there are direct mailings, there is lit pieces, there's the direct ask, and the thing goes on and on and on. One of the best things about fundraising is it is the chance for you to get the message out to the people who need to hear it. So, and meet new people. So you end up, so a very good way to raise quite a bit of money, which is different than like the nonprofit world or, you know, trying to raise money for something other than campaigning. Events are actually a good mechanism for raising money for campaigns. And it gives you the opportunity to meet the people. Ask your friends to host an event, and you'd be surprised at how many people they'll bring in that they know who will come to that event that they host, and then you make your pitch, and then they ask for the money. So some of the things George was saying, you know, don't make any assumptions about how much people are going to donate to you, because you'd be surprised at what it is that they'll cough up when it is something that they care about. So fundraising is another mechanism for getting the word out about what it is that you need to do. So some of the common ways for that face-to-face or maybe events are the meet and greets. And so you want to bring your lit, you want to bring your best self forward, and be prepared to answer those questions. So again, that messaging, the campaign plan, and all of those things you need to have in place before you can do your fundraising plan, because you won't know how much money you need. You won't know where your dollars are going to come from until you put down your points. So if it's environment and education and incarceration, those are your three things you're going to run on, and you're going to get your messaging on that, and you're going to target the people who care about those things as well. And that will translate back into a timeline so that you can find out when it is that you're going to show up at those end jail rallies, when you need to get those lit pieces out so it times with those things, so you can have a calendar, which we're going to talk about later, to make sure that you are prepared all the way along. So your fundraising campaign, your fundraising plan is tied directly into all of those little different things. So with the events, sometimes you want them to be small and targeted, and people that know that host, and it's very specific. We're going to have $100, $200. That's the minimum to walk into the door. You never turn anybody away, though. But you put it on, they will put it on their invitation, because it's a meet and greet to come and meet you that's hosted by somebody else. And so they're going to do all of that work for you. They might contact the campaign manager, but that campaign manager has already asked the host. And some people do this routinely. We've had events where $4,000 were raised by just a few people. We've had events where you've had 100 people, and we've only raised a couple. And there's really no rhyme to reason. It's just the way it is. But you have these over and over again, and the primary goal is what? To reduce that deficit, to make sure you've got those votes. So all of your money, all of your messaging, all of your stuff is done like that. But there are tools. You've got online tools, there are campaign tools, there are lit pieces, or lists of people that the party can send to directly for you, providing addresses as well. So there's all of these little different things. There is one thing I do want to say. There are pitfalls for asking for money when you're not addressing the right group. So you really do need to know who you're talking to. So you want to talk with your campaign manager and have your campaign manager really talk to the person who's hosting this. Who are the people who are going to be here? What are the expectations? And why are they doing this for me? You know, so there's those things that you need to know going in so that you don't misstep. You know, so that it's all a lot about that messaging. But you've already done all of that work. Like Dave said, you've created your team, you know your plan, you know where you're going, and fundraising will be there to support the campaign itself. You can actually win on a little bit of money if you keep that message on point and don't disregard the things that you're being told by the people who are around you. So keep your campaign manager close, and don't presume that the crowd is one when it's actually another. So that'll keep you together right there. Events are a really, really good way to do it and keep yourself in check what you think about messaging. Thanks. I don't know who's next.
And if I can get this one out of your pocket. What's your source?
Just like to log into my
that's what you ordered more
account.
Okay. Put this in one pocket.
Okay.
And put this in another pocket.
Okay. Thanks.
Oh.
Which is the left click on the mouse pad? Oh, here's a mouse. Great.
It's a mouse and it's left-handed. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Just choose something.
This in 6 months, but
Hi guys, I'm Thomas Ward. I live here in Milwaukee. I'm with the Green Party, and break out your scratch paper, pens, open up your smartphone, calculator. We're going to do some 5th grade math to start this presentation on Google Calendars. So I just counted that we have, we're down to 17 folks in the room. And I'd like a show of hands of who among you, and this includes everyone, has a Google account. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And Dan and Charles, do you guys have Google accounts?
Wait, I got
Yeah.
both arms up and one leg and 5 toes.
Right. So I guess I'll ditch my math spreadsheet and just say that it's 100% of us have Google accounts. Now, when I asked that, if you have a Google account, I could have easily have said who is voluntarily sharing their personal information with a multinational technology monopolist that is currently developing, working with the US government to refine the deadliness of the drone assassination program. The Green Party is not currently offering solutions to any cognitive dissonance that you may have about being a grassroots activist and being involved in these data breach scandals. However, the fact of the matter is that 100%, you probably didn't know 100% of the people that are in this room when you walked in today, but 100% of us are sharing a suite of technology tools that potentially has something to offer us as activists. So another show of hands, who's already using Google Calendars in some aspect of their life? Seems like about half, maybe a little more than half. Can I see that? Daniel, where are you using them?
For my department.
Yeah, work.
Yeah.
A lot of folks are familiar with them at work. If you are using them at work or extensively in anywhere, you're probably a greater expert in this field than I am, and you could be giving this presentation. However, I'm just going to try to explore some of the functionality of Google Calendars and Sheets with my own account here, and it's not explicitly political, but maybe we can just see and look at how to schedule things, how to share with folks for anyone that needs a refresher on that. So I've got my Google account, my account. allows me to open up all the myriad Google products, and the one we're interested in today is the calendar. So Damien was talking about choosing your communications infrastructure, and there are many choices, all the way from laser optics to hand delivery by horse and buggy. Google Calendar might be somewhere in the middle, and it's simply one option, but since we all share it, that's something we're going to look at for political purposes. So a basic, it basically you create a list of calendars. So here's what I have, and you basically have some of your own, and you have some that you have shared with folks. So here's the ones that I've created, and then below that is all the ones that that have been shared with me. I recently joined a digital co-working space in South Milwaukee called 5Wise Workshop, and they specifically have the mission of inclusion in technology and entrepreneurship, which is great. I feel like it's a good community asset here in Milwaukee that we have. And they have a bunch of, I'll say we have a bunch of calendars. So a lot of the noise on my feed is now from 5Wise. So those are all the ones that are shared with me. I had the experience of looking through this morning in preparing this presentation. Going into next week, these all get lit up because they're current. And I saw that over here, something was shared with me that I didn't recognize that I was still monitoring this group, but it's a really cool event. Second weekend-long camping trip to the Trail of Tears State Forest within the Greater Shawnee National Forest, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, darn, I'm booked that weekend, I can't make it, but I'm glad I found out about it. Maybe some of my friends that are organizing in Southern Illinois would like to connect with Habitat 2030 for some ecological restoration. So the point is, I randomly scrolled through my calendar feed, and I found that visually I was getting information that I didn't have before about something of interest to me. So I can imagine that working in the same context for a political candidate. Say you're sharing with, a large network of constituents, potential voters. That might be one category of information and a way of sharing. So that brings me to something I have a question about, and I open it up to the floor. What's the best way to organize a list of different calendars for a political campaign?
Good question.
Tom.
Would you do it? I'm guessing you do it in a role-based way. That would be the first thing, like Damien said, so that people could swap in and out. And then you'd have different levels of permissions, because you wouldn't want certain people to see, you'd have to figure that out. You build that into your model. So those
Nice.
two things.
So it's a set of calendars that's based on different people's functions, role-based within the campaign, and with changing permissions. I think that's an excellent answer, role-based. I'm not sure it's the only one. There might be a variety. I can sort of, any other thoughts come to mind of something other than like a role-based way of organizing, making a list of calendars? Datsa?
So there's a lot of neighborhood, like if you're working a local campaign. There's a lot of neighborhood and issue-based organizations that use the Google Calendar, and you can subscribe to those, and then you would know when your candidate does need to show up at a neighborhood meeting or at the Sierra Club meeting or at the normal meeting, wherever it is, to, give their elevator speech about legalizing marijuana, cleaning our lakes, making our neighborhoods more livable.
So you bring up a point, Datsa, that I hadn't specifically included in here, but is critical, that there are many Google Calendars from outside a given campaign that need to be incorporated within it, so that, for example, the candidate appears at the right community event to speak. So I think that's another good way of looking at organizing. It could be, the example that came to mind for me was location. And this 5 Whys calendar that I have here is more or less organized by location. There's multiple rooms that can be reserved, and there are private events, and that's how that list is divided. So we might do the same thing if we're having a team symposium or a conference where we have different meeting rooms with different things going on. So I'm gonna just do a quick demo of creating an event in this. This calendar I just made this morning, CC Maps and Analytics. It's tied in with the greens. There's been some discussion today about the water quality, lead toxicity issue in the city of Milwaukee, surrounding area, many communities. And we as local Greens here are involved with that coalition. I have an academic partner, and he and I are taking the lead on spatial data visualization, GIS services for this coalition, and we're looking to leverage those tools for the sake of activism. So, and there's a meeting coming up on the 19th with this coalition where we've been asked to prepare maps. So I made a calendar for that, and I think there's a few different ways to initiate events, but let me first, I'll open this calendar and I want to share it with my mapping buddy. So I open settings on this one and go down to the share section. You may well know a lot of these Google documents operate based on listing the folks you want to share with. So there's a tab here for add people. I'll click that. I've got a few people. David Schwab's pops up. He's someone I could potentially connect with. And here's my buddy Welsenbach that I'm doing mapping with. So he's in there, and I'm gonna, as Tom mentioned, there's levels of permission. So he and I are basically full partners on this. I want him to have full access, so he gets make changes and manage sharing. And I'm gonna send that, and I hope he accepts it. Getting back out of that, now let's do some work. We've got a deadline for maps on the 19th, and we need to create some type of working event. So typically we've been meeting on, let me back up. It shows you here which calendar you're listed in. So I don't want it in my straight up personal calendar. I want to change this to this business one that I recently created. So now the event I'm creating is in CC Maps. And I think if you just click in these fields, it gives you edit options, right? Right. And we've been meeting on Thursdays. I think we'll do that again. Thursday, 6 p.m., 2-hour meeting, 8 p.m. And location, Fuel Cafe on Center. So that looks good for now. I might go back and edit that, but I think I'm basically happy with it. I'm going to save that one. And now I've got it. It's color-coded with CC Maps. It appears on Thursday, and I can invite folks, and it mixes in with the rest of the things that I have going on in my feed. And that is about what I have for demonstration. Anyone else want to share anything, questions? Damien.
So one of the ways that we set it up for a couple of the different teams that I worked with is we'd set up kind of different layers of how much access. So for example, the campaign manager and the candidate got to see everything. The doctor's appointments, everything to kind of know what was happening. Then the next layer was just kind of like blocked time. So they might, the leadership team could see that the candidate was busy 10 to 11, but didn't know what it was, just that it was 10 to 11. So you could kind of build that next layer. And so we had a group that could share that. And then you'd have another layer that was all the volunteers could see everything. So these would be, we're doing events on Saturdays. These are the pickets that we're going to be working at. These are the different meetings that we're going to be at. This is when we're going to have our team meeting. This is when we're going to have our weekly meetings. So there was another layer that got opened up to even more people. And then finally, we'd actually create a public calendar of all the things in the area, because now we're the thought leaders. So like Datsa was talking about, you can go through and see the different communities. Well, we'd start to pull those together and say, you don't need to go look at everybody else's. We'll put it all into ours because we know what's happening, because we're a part of this community. Come watch us. And that way we got new people in a closer relationship that way. And it was a good way to share that. That allowed for a new volunteer to kick in and immediately see the whole calendar, including what was happening in the past, and like, oh, you guys meet every 2 weeks, always. Okay, great. Oh, this is a one-off meeting. I can see how that works. So that's one of the ways that we did it, is kind of setting it up, and then we'd have the groups kind of access that. That also allowed it so that when people dropped out of the group, we didn't have to go through and really do lots of management. We just kicked them out of the group, and they got to move on with their life, and we got to move on with ours.
Nice. So it sounds like Damien and his team dug into some of the different functions of the platform, and also specifically looked to collect a variety of calendar sources into their own, and invite the community to monitor and find information that way. And that seems like a great organizing method. Tom?
Just quick question that I run into is, or this issue, it's really goofy. You have the group set up, people are added to the group, but then you want to enumerate all the people in the group. How do you do that? And what are these groups? Or are these simply shared accounts when you?
So we would set up basically a new account for each layer, and that would be a group. So one of the tasks we actually had was some of our tech team would actually go through and say, okay, we need to keep a City Hall events account, and then that could be shared with everybody at that layer. So part of it is you end up creating new calendars that are standalone, so that you don't have to them necessarily attached to a specific person. And then from there you can also share who has access to that appropriately. Does that make sense, or is that still confusing?
Are you all sharing the same password for that one account, or is there literally a list of email addresses that gets?
So we would set up groups that could use it, but we would also have a limited number of people that would have administrative access to that account. That's one of the key things, is that anytime you give rights to anybody on any tool, you always need to make sure that multiple people have, in essence, the keys. You never want to just give all the keys to one person, because sometimes they get sick, sometimes they get hit by a bus, sometimes they just don't work out.
What did Dave say earlier? You need to find the tech-savvy folks to be part of your campaign, and then it seems like this is a conversation that could easily be happening within a campaign headquarters with some digital skill sharing happening.
Is there a limit to how many calendars you can add on there?
Question was, is there any limit to how many calendars can be added? And as far as I know, there's not as many as your eyeballs can reasonably retain in a column.
So just this free Google Calendar application is pretty good compared to other software you could use.
It is, yeah, powerful.
I just wanted to say that I just discovered an app called Don't Forget the Milk. And it's, has anybody, oh, yeah, I think it's Don't Forget the Milk. That might be a different one. Yeah, maybe it is. But it's free, at least the basic version of the app is free. And it's, I think I might like it better than Google Calendars because it was developed specifically for managing big teams working on big projects. And you can get really specific with individuals and what you want them to do and what you want their timeline to look like in relation to your broader timeline. So, yeah.
That's a great point, Christina, and goes to the idea that the best technology platform is the one that suits your campaign.
Could I just say one too? Do I really need that?
We need it for the YouTube.
Right, okay. I just remembered a friend of mine does this kind of thing for a living, and they use one called Team Up. T-E-A-M-U-P, and she really likes that one, and they use it for all over the world, I think. And it's easy to use, so check it out.
So Deb has her preferred, and any one of us might have a preferred application to find. Damien, go ahead.
One of the other things to keep an eye out for is a lot of the other apps will actually integrate with Gmail. So something like Trello, for example, has what they call power-ups, which is basically their premium, that you can actually tap into Google and some of the other tools like that. So, yeah, they're more and more kind of like cross-platform and integrating multiple pieces together.
I guess I have a question about the best way to handle it. Let's say you have a public calendar that you'd want the public to see as a candidate, and maybe like a private that you want your team to see. Is there a way to like set that? Like, would you do two separate groups for that and set one? Is that something like how would the public have access then as you set that? Is that something you can like set onto like your campaign page perhaps?
Yeah, just exactly that. You would set the page up, and then you can. Your first option when you create the calendar is to say, is this public or not? And since very few of us even consider that, you just click on public. But this isn't Field of Dreams, so you need to share it with everybody and let them all know that it's there. So like you said, put it on all of your pages and let them know. And I would regularly tweet and in social media all of the different events, and then reference that it's on your calendar as well, so that that's where all the details are, and it's a good way to drive them towards that.
Datsa?
So I was just going to say that once you've shared the calendar, regardless of what sorts of allowances you have on there for what people can see and how they can edit, you can give it to somebody else when you leave. You can change the ownership of that calendar. not necessarily your personal calendar, but any calendar that you create. So Joe's campaign calendar, you can assign it to somebody else to be owner of that.
Anything else on Google Calendars? Digital networking? Thanks. Really good discussion, guys.
Thanks, Tomas.
Yeah.
All right. So at this point, I think that dinner is ready. Is that correct? Or almost ready? Yeah, so any minute now, dinner will be ready. And that said, we are running behind a little bit on our planned agenda. We did get a late start because of the technical issues. So what we're going to do is definitely invite people to go over and get some food and hit the restroom if you like, and basically feel free to take a break. Meanwhile, I will go through a brief presentation on technology, since that seems to be a hot issue, and hopefully that will help us to get back on track, because we do have to be out of here by our end time of 7:45, 8. Yeah, so I guess I will start that presentation, and then as soon as Greg comes in and signals that the dinner is ready, like I said, feel free to get something to eat. All right, so technology is next, and also I will need the mics. Do you have the, oh, they're right here. Okay, great. Thank you. Sounds right.
You are ready to rock.
All right. Yes, number one rule of technology and campaigns, don't trip on the wires. All right, so let's talk a little bit more, and I'll try to make it a little bit about tech tools for organizing, because obviously this is a big issue that we could talk about a lot, and people have already started talking about some of the tools that they like, that they've heard other people using. And yeah, we can get into that a little bit, but I'll just try to go through some basics first. All right, so think about grassroots organizing with technology. It can offer a lot of useful tools to help you organize, but just keep in mind that even the best tech tools won't organize for you. Technology is to facilitate and improve your organizing. Don't let tech get in your way. So a big issue is internal communications on your team. How do you communicate among core team members, and how do you communicate with volunteers? We were just talking about this a little bit, having sort of those different levels of information. So the first thing is find out what people's preferred communication methods are. Maybe you like using Google Calendars, but everyone else on your team loves using iCalendars, and they already know everything about that. So by finding out what people's preferred methods are, you'll be able to hit the ground running. Your choice of tools is going to be affected by their personal preferences, by their availability, both in time and space, their ability to learn new technology, and your budget and your technological resources. That means how many computers, smartphones, cameras do you have? And another thing is, with all these fancy tech tools that we have, remember, it's still good to get FaceTime to build relationships. And that's not like FaceTime the app. That's actually being face-to-face with people and meeting them. But it can be unrealistic for everyone to meet regularly. And so tech can help you fill those gaps. So your team members, now, of course, everyone's available all the time with their phones. But team members should set expectations about their availability. Times when they won't be reachable, times when they won't be able to work, and just what's their downtime. And all tech tools have pros and cons, right? So we'll get into that just a little bit. So in my view, pretty essential tool for internal communications is the email list. Popular example is Google Groups. And you can share information with a team of people. You don't have to address it specifically to every member of the group every time you send an email. But there's some downsides to email lists, right? People can feel overloaded with information that's not really relevant to their role. Maybe they're not willing or able to read all their emails. Maybe they don't check emails frequently, and they miss the email saying, hey, there's a call tonight. And with all the emails in people's inboxes, they can lose track of tasks that they're supposed to follow up on. Some of these issues might sound familiar. So we'll get to some other tools that can maybe help solve some of those problems. Texting is another very popular group tool. And for example, I've found when we have a conference call, of course, send an email a week before and a day before and shortly before the conference call, but also send out a text the day of the conference call to remind people. Because again, they might lose track of the email. You get immediate communication, a little ding, oh yeah, we've got the call going on. This can be good for things when you need quick response, like the ground game, when you have volunteers out in the field. Checking in with someone about a task, bringing someone's attention, okay, I sent you an email, did you see it? That sort of thing. But there's some downsides to this too. For example, those group text conversations that you're like, how did I end up in this? And you keep getting texts that you don't care about. That's pretty annoying. And also you might get a text saying, and you have to jump over to your computer. There's a link over here. Someone sent you an image, you're like, how do I get this onto my computer? And sort of the older people are, typically the less comfortable they are with texting. And that it just has to do with the technologies that people are used to. But certainly I forget this sometimes, and I talk to people, did you see my text? Like, oh, you sent me a text message. Oh, I don't really know much about text messages. We kind of forget about that. So conference calls are another tool that we use a lot. And is there any word on dinner?
Yes.
I'm seeing people.
We are ready. So how about if we take a 10-minute break?
So as I just mentioned, I'm going to try to plow through this presentation to get us back on track, but people can feel free to just go up and get your dinner while I'm talking to the camera. All right. So free conference call services are available. You get various options with them. For example, you can see who else is on the call. And regular conference calls can really help to keep your team organized and on track. Obviously, make sure to share the info that people need to get on the call, including numbers and access codes. Make it easy. Again, such a frequent problem that people are like, okay, we've got the conference call. Oh no, where's the number I need to call? Where's the access code? Just save time, get people on the call, get through it in a timely fashion. You don't want to waste people's time. Video conferencing is sort of a conference call plus. You've got some free services like Skype, Google Hangouts. There are also some paid services that offer more features. For example, some of these services, you can share a screen. You can sort of write on the screen like it's a whiteboard. They're just fancy little things that sort of add functions and can be very useful. So Video conferences can allow for FaceTime. They can also allow for screen sharing. That can be useful for things, for example, for demonstrating software, sharing a lit piece or graphic design, reviewing a website. Basically, in addition to sort of being nice to connect with people and look at them, sometimes it's just hard to describe things verbally over a conference. I mean, imagine trying to describe your new graphic design logo versus just showing it to people on their screen while you're talking about it. Google Drive and Google Docs is another very popular app that a lot of people use. You can share documents, spreadsheets, files. You can let other people view, comment, download, edit. It's very useful for collaborating on written documents, sharing data in spreadsheets, sharing videos, graphics, and other files. Again, I consider this pretty essential for collaborating with people these days, especially when you're not all sharing an office together. Although, of course, the caveat is that I'm not endorsing any particular product or corporation here, and there may be, for some of these other apps that work as well or better, or that may be more affordable. These are just some examples of popular tools that a lot of people are using now. Google Calendar, we just talked about. You can organize your schedule. You can share calendars with others. This can be really good for project management with a team. Slack is one that's pretty popular and a lot of campaigns are using. It's a free app that you can use on your computer or your smartphone. You can basically text people or have little chat rooms. You can have a chat room for your whole team. You can have little sub-teams, your communications team, your field team, your executive team, etc. And you can get notifications of new messages so you can respond pretty quickly. Dropbox is a free service for easy file sharing, cloud storage. Trello is another organizational and project management app. So you can create sort of a bulletin board with different cards to organize tasks. Canva is a popular free app which allows you to pretty simply design graphics and memes, even if you feel like you don't have any experience with that. This tool makes it pretty easy, and there are others that do a similar thing. Basecamp, this is a paid software, but a lot of people like it for team communication and project management. You see that with some larger campaigns, and some parties like to use Basecamp. Nation Builder. So this is a paid software, and it has two big functions: a content management system, so sort of how you create your web page and put content on your web page, etc. It's also customer relationship management, so it's a database, and it allows you to send email blasts, and it allows you to get call lists and donor lists and a lot of things like that. Nation Builder currently is used by the Green Party of the U.S. It's used by the Wisconsin Green Party, and a lot of state Green parties use Nation Builder, as well as campaigns. The Stein-Baraka 2016 campaign used Nation Builder, and a lot of campaigns are finding it's pretty useful for them. So Nation Builder, it makes it relatively simple to design web pages. You can integrate functions like sign up and volunteer portals. You can send email blasts, create contact lists, take donations, and a lot more. There's a lot of details, but there's really a lot of functionality. It's very much designed for campaigns, parties, nonprofit organizations, and the like. This is, however, a little more complicated software. There is a learning curve, and it's best suited for campaigns with tech-savvy team members. If you're running a local campaign over the next 4 months and you're new to tech, then it might be difficult for you to dive into Nation Builder. But on the other hand, I consider it someone like myself without really a tech or IT background can get the hang of Nation Builder over a longer campaign, and you know, it can be very useful. It's kind of in that middle ground. And there are a lot of other apps. You know, we could go on all day for a lot of essential campaign tasks: phone banking, text banking, email blast, graphic design, data management, volunteer management. It's always a good idea to ask other Greens and candidates for recommendations on the apps that they like. And of course, ask your team members. And again, not necessarily endorsing these apps or companies. These are just some tools out there that some people find useful. So let's talk about working remotely for a second. There's some great things about working remotely. It gives you the ability to collaborate with team members and volunteers from a wide geographical area. And it means less travel time, expense, and pollution. And it makes it easier to work with people who aren't available to travel, like people with children, those with disabilities, if they don't have a car, if they're living abroad. But you know, there are some disadvantages or concerns, like productivity concerns. You know, it's harder to manage a team when your members aren't in the same physical location. You know, it used to be a campaign office where everyone was in close contact. Now a lot of times people are more spread out. So that leads to communication issues, like less frequent communication. You have people working at different times, not being in the same space. So, you know, how can we all look over the new graphics if we're all in different areas? You get miscommunications. So all of these issues can lead to less effective, less organized work. And there's also a learning curve where you need to learn new technologies to work remotely. So this takes time to learn, and it often leads to technical difficulties. So there are solutions to these problems. Once you're aware of them, you can tackle them. For productivity, for example, check in frequently with team members. For example, you should have a regularly scheduled full team call. You can set goals and timelines with shared calendars and documents, and check in regularly on people's progress. Again, this is very much what a campaign manager does. And as we talked about, set SMART goals that are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-limited. For communication issues, again, set regular times to check in. It's really important. Ask team members to share their work schedule and try to contact them at times when they're available. If you set regular in-person meetings or video conferences, then that way you can get FaceTime and build relationships, improve communication, you know, learn other people's communication styles. And it can be a really good idea to use video conference apps with screen sharing so you can look over things with other people. Again, because sometimes when you're not in the same office, it can be really difficult just to do something simple like, let's all look at this you know, new lit piece and say what you think. And there are miscommunication issues when you work remotely. So check your communications for anything that can be misinterpreted. Email is notorious for misinterpretation. If there are sensitive communications, don't include people who aren't directly involved. If you have potential conflicts arising, try to resolve them with one-on-one communication. You know, don't bring it up on the full team call before you talk with that person directly. And just be aware that online communication often leads to misunderstandings. So try to work through them patiently and don't get caught up in conflicts. And again, there's a technology learning curve. So make a realistic assessment of your team members' tech skills and their capacity to learn new skills on top of all the other campaign work that they have in the limited amount of time for your campaign. If you have to use a less sophisticated technology, that's better than trying to use something that your team members just aren't able to work with. So some questions to ask. Do you have somebody who's the go-to person for the technologies you're using? Maybe someone who knows all of them, or two different people who, you know, one is your database master, Another one knows all your other apps inside and out. And are they able to effectively train other team members to use the tech tools? Because you need, obviously, one person who knows all your tech, but they also need to be able to train other people. And even if people aren't able to use certain technology, they should still have some way to help. Not everyone can go into the database and pull out a call list and enter all their calls into the software directly and all those things. But they should still be able to dial the phone numbers and make the calls. And if you can find a way to accommodate those people, then they can still contribute. All right, so speaking of data, and here's one of my favorite pieces of data, the percentage of Americans who believe that the Democratic and Republican parties do such a poor job representing us that a third major party is needed. It was 60% of people agreed with that in 2016. Now it's even higher. So data is super important for campaigns because, first of all, you need contact info to do targeting for communications and outreach. You need to identify supporters, volunteers, and donors. Data is important for getting out the vote. Again, even if you don't have people's direct contact info from going out and doing door canvassing, you have an idea of who your likely supporters are and where they are. And also data is about cultivating relationships with supporters for future campaigns and party building. I've often seen people go out tabling and they will have great conversations with people and talk with them for an hour, and they're so sure that this person is going to run home and join the Green Party and sign up to run for office. And I say, did you get them to put their contact info on the sheet? Like, oh no, just never got to that. They got it. And odds are you're never going to hear from that person again. You need to get their info so you can follow up and build the relationship. It's so important. The good news is that you don't have to start from scratch. You can get data. For example, when you have candidates endorsed by the Green Party, then the party can provide existing data to them. You can talk to other past campaigns, whether they're running for the same office or maybe running for a local office in your district or running for a bigger office. Chances are they might have data that can help you. You should ask. You can often get voter data from state agencies that can help you figure out who's a likely voter, sometimes even get some information about how progressive they're voting. And of course, you need to gather data during your campaign, and that's contact info as well as supporter info for getting out the vote. Just get as much data as you can, really. And just a few best practices. Having someone on your team who knows how to manage your database is priceless. You want to make sure that your database is updated regularly. If you are gathering all this info out when you're gathering signatures, but it's sitting around for a month before it gets uploaded into your database, you're not following up with those people while they're excited, then again, you're going to lose a lot of them. You need to make sure your data is backed up. You absolutely don't want to lose your data and not have it backed up. That can be catastrophic. And you always need to have a way to collect info from new supporters. So this pretty much means always have a clipboard with a sign-up sheet at all events throughout your campaign. And another tip is if you just have a sort of quick little form on your website, you can even pull out your phone or pull out the phone of the person who you're talking to and say, hey, you can sign up right here. But again, always be signing people up. Again, the greatest conversation in the world is probably just a waste of time unless you get data so that you can follow up with that person and build that relationship. So that's it for technology. Any questions?
You want to say
Oh yeah, thank you for that, because I think as I mentioned a little earlier, social media is something that we're going to be talking about in a lot more detail pretty shortly. So I will put that in the bike rack for now because I'm going to be talking a lot about that in a few minutes.
So the question was about tweeting.
Yes.
And you're going to put that in the parking lot, or bike lot.
In your opinion, how important is security? How concerned about security should we be as we're sharing information about the campaign through email, text, phone, things like that?
Yeah, good question. So how important is security? Obviously, it's extremely important. And especially when you are dealing with other people's data, the last thing that you want is for that to be stolen or leaked or have someone misuse that data. And fortunately, we haven't had a lot of incidents like that, but sometimes it seems like it's only a matter of time. So one thing to make sure that you do is whenever you are sharing data, say with volunteers or anyone like that, you should just have a little non-disclosure agreement that basically they're agreeing to only use that data for the purposes that they're explicitly allowed to. And what that means is that they are legally not allowed to say, take that data and go give it to another campaign or to another organization without permission. So, as for security, we're all trying to keep up, but as we've seen, like even some of the even some of the richest corporations have their data hacked into and stolen. So, yeah, I think the best we can do is just try to follow the best practices that we have. It's good again to have tech-savvy people who are up on this sort of stuff. Basically do as much as we can to protect ourselves. And I mean, another thing is that just know that the constitutional right to privacy is dead. So any email that you send can be read by the government. As we've seen, our personal communications can be used. And
See, that wants me to design one of these Robert Reich whiteboard things, how he draws the cartoons. And does anybody know what kind of software? I'm having a devil of a time trying to find that software. I've written to him. He hasn't answered, of course. So.
Yeah, that's a good question. As I said, my dirty secret is that I'm actually not the tech whiz in the group. I usually rely on other people for that sort of thing. But yeah, so the short answer is I'm not sure how you would get that sort of whiteboard software, but I'm sure that there is someone out there who knows, and that's the great thing about the internet.
Well, it seems like a lot of people do that on YouTube also, and they might be shared there. I don't know. What?
I've seen some of the explainer video tools that are getting very common. So there's some apps. Initially, they were charging pretty high fees, and the rates keep coming down and down. And I think as the software gets easier and they can just set it up as software as a service. So I'll take a look, reach out to me, and I'll try and, as David said, the key is to keep asking the question to enough places, and you'll find somebody who's tripped across it.
Put it out over Facebook and all over, and nobody knows.
Yeah. Well, sometimes there are people with, impressive budgets, and they can hire videographers and graphic designers. But more and more, that stuff is becoming, I mean, you see amateur YouTubers who have beautiful looking videos, and we're seeing more and more tools. Like I mentioned, it used to be you had to basically hire a graphic designer to create memes, someone who was a wizard with Adobe, and now they're just websites that you can go to, click a click, you've got a meme. Yeah, so you know, sometimes it's easier. Maybe there's an app out there that makes this really easy that we just haven't stumbled across yet. All right. Thanks. So what do we have next?
No, we don't want to do that.
After the dinner break? Social media. Oh, okay. All right, well, I guess I can do one more before I get dinner. Yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you. My name's Steve, by the way.
Steve? All right, I'm Dave.
Yeah, will do. Thanks. I'm already members, so. Okay, I'll be in touch. Thanks, guys.
All right. So to answer your question, let's talk about social media. So just real quickly, who uses social media? And the answer is most of us, over half of US adults. 80% of adults are online, and 74% of them use social media, with 71% of us using Facebook, and 23% use Twitter. And since I put this together, that number probably went up. Maybe it's gone down a little bit, but still, it's clear that a landslide majority of people are on Facebook. And 40% of cell phone owners are using social media on their phone. That's probably going up all the time. And actually, these people are not tuned out of life, because frequent Facebook users are 2.5 times more likely to attend a political rally, 53% more likely to persuade someone about their vote, and they're 43% more likely to vote. So, yeah, I think we all know those Facebook users. But there are limits to social media, just like there are limits to technology. It's a useful tool, but it's still just a tool to support your organizing. It cannot and it should not replace traditional organizing. And keep in mind, there's still millions of people who don't use social media, including many lower income people who don't have regular internet access. So don't rely solely on social media. So for example, probably many of us have experienced the Facebook RSVP dilemma, where you set up an event and lots of people RSVP to say that they're going to come, and then on the day of the event, less than half the people actually show up to your event. And it just goes to show that social media by itself won't do your organizing for you. It's really important that you use other organizing tools like phone calls, door knocking, posters, face-to-face conversations, and social media is just a part of that. So obviously Facebook is still the 800-pound gorilla when we're talking about social media. And there's some good things about it. It's free to use. It's connected to the largest online community in the world. And again, we're meeting the people where they are, with over 70% of US adults on Facebook. And there are a lot of movements and campaigns that have used Facebook effectively to communicate their message and organize for action. For example, Occupy Wall Street. And we've also seen groups like Black Lives Matter use this very effectively to organize action. But there's also some bad things about Facebook. It's a for-profit business with some controversial practices, privacy issues and use of personal data for marketing, as well as the data breaches that we've all heard so much about. And also Facebook, it's not a public utility, it's a private corporation. They can change the rules anytime they want. For example, pages used to reach all of their followers. Now they only reach a fraction of their followers. So a lot of page owners basically feel like they have to pay for promotions to reach their own followers. So that said, lots of people are still using Facebook. And odds are you probably want your campaign to use Facebook. So if you don't know what Facebook is, here's a quick introduction. You can make a personal account. Everyone can have one for free. And you post things and share things on your own wall or timeline, as it's usually called now. You can spread the word to friends and family about something that you're excited about. You can post on your friend's timeline and bring their attention to a campaign or issue. You can post in a group and spread the word to a whole community of people who might be interested in what you're talking about. You want to personalize your posts. So when whether you're posting or sharing something, especially when it's about politics, it really helps a lot to personalize the post. Otherwise, it just sort of gets lost in the static. So just write a line or two to explain why it's important to you. Or you can ask a question that's meant to spark a discussion. So if others actually engage you in conversation, your post is going to reach a lot more people and have more impact. So let's talk about pages, because most political campaigns and organizations create Facebook pages. And these are different than groups because only users with permission can post to the pages. So it's really it's a more top-down thing. It's sort of like, this is the voice of our campaign. It's not just any Yahoo off the street can post here. And your posts will show up in the Facebook, the feeds or timelines of people who follow you. So if you're just starting out, choose a Howie Hawkins for New York governor. Customize the pictures on your page. Add a short description, include your website, and you can add a call to action. For example, sign up for email updates. And then when you post on your page, there's an algorithm that determines how many people your posts are going to reach. And that's determined by something that's called engagement, which is a combination of likes and other reactions, shares, comments, and clicks. So if your posts get little engagement, they only reach a fraction of your followers. If they get a lot of engagement, they can reach way more people than follow your page. They can go viral and reach all of Facebook. And over time, the algorithm actually affects your page so that you have a baseline reach. If your posts tend to get good engagement, then your reach will go up. If your posts tend to get little engagement, then the Facebook algorithm will say, all right, we're not going to show these posts to people from this page. So you really have to think about creating posts that will create engagement and that will benefit your outreach. So part of this is frequency. If you post too often or too rarely, that can hurt your reach. So you don't necessarily want to be posting every hour, every thought that comes across your mind. But if you only post once a month, people are going to think nothing's going on. So try to post 1 to 3 times per day with at least 2 hours between posts. Don't do 3 posts all in the same hour. Unless there's some exciting event like breaking news, you're on the scene, we're live streaming, or it's election day and things are really happening. Then you can post more. But in general, try not to flood it. And for every post, you want a little blurb. Generally don't just post a link without some descriptor. And make it short and sweet. People scroll through their feeds very quickly. You need to grab their attention and make them stop and give them a reason. If they see a long chunk of text, just like if you give them a piece of paper that's just text from top to bottom, most of them will recycle it right away. It's the same with Facebook posts. So too much text is bad, If there's no blurb, those also get skipped. So usually you want something like 1 to 4 sentences, just short and sweet. Grab their attention, make them stop, engage somehow, hopefully click. So you also want to be posting links, because you can get a lot of page likes and have a popular page, but that doesn't really accomplish much, especially in politics, right? You need to somehow convert that into support and votes. So your goal here is to get people more involved. So for example, to sign up for email, sign up to volunteer, to donate, things like that. So a lot of your posts should include links to pages on your website, to campaign events, give people a way to get involved. And post pictures. That is, make sure that your posts have pictures. Good pictures can really help the engagement. Having bad pictures or no pictures can kill your engagement. If you ever see a post that is just kind of like the preview is a little piece of text or a Google Doc or something, that kills engagement. You want a picture that it will cause people to stop and say, hey, I want to click on this. Sometimes you'll post a link and a weird picture will come up that doesn't make sense, or it's boring, it's not going to grab people's attention. You can actually upload a new picture and say, forget that automatic picture, I want this one. Make sure that you've got good pictures on your posts. Sometimes you have stock photos that you can reuse. For example, the one on this page right here is very useful. And sometimes you're posting just photos. It's not really a link, it's just photos from your rally or something. That's cool, but make sure to write something so that your followers know what they're looking at. That can make all the difference. If they don't know what they're looking at, they'll be confused and they'll skip it. If you say, wow, hundreds of people came out to the rally, then they'll be like, that's awesome. All right. So likes and other reactions are the least important form of engagement, but it can help you to understand what people are interested in. And there are other reactions now other than liking. So that can tell you if your post got the reaction that you wanted. Shares are very important because they get your post in front of new people who might follow your page or go to your website. You want shares so that you can grow. And you should pay close attention to which of your posts get the most shares, because that really shows content that your followers care enough about that they're willing to say, yeah, this needs to be bigger. So when you see the type of content that is getting shares, think about why that happened and try to replicate that and create posts that people want to share. So then there are comments. This can be a good way to engage people. They might ask questions, they might offer help. So if you reply to them, you can gain a supporter right there. But comments also require moderation, sometimes judgment calls. You'll get controversial or skeptical comments, critical questions. Don't automatically censor those, because sometimes a good discussion can boost the engagement and boost the reach, and sometimes you can win people over. But if you think someone is commenting just to make trouble, then you probably want to hide or delete their comments. Consider banning them from your page. And then the fourth element is clicks. So obviously, like I said, the goal of posting is to get people more involved. So if you post a petition, you want to sign people up for your email list, and having them click on the link and go to your web page is what you want to do. So Facebook also tracks that, and it will be very good for your engagement, and it also shows you, how is your Facebook page helping to convert your Facebook followers into email subscribers, volunteers, donors, because typically someone on your email list who you have the contact info for, you're able to do a lot more with them than just someone who follows your Facebook page. And then there are memes, which nowadays pretty much means an image with text on it. And if you have attention-grabbing memes, it can really help to spread your message. So not everyone knows how to create memes, but there are resources to create your own. For example, as I mentioned, Canva, other free graphic design apps. And you can share memes from other greens and like-minded organizations. Acknowledge the source. And again, it's a very visual medium. So oftentimes, these get a lot of shares and a lot of engagement. And people can message your page. And you can reply to engage them, ask them to sign up on your website, begin an email conversation, give them a way to get involved. Sometimes you start getting a lot of the same questions, and you can actually create canned responses. For example, how do I volunteer? Oh, thanks for asking. Go to this website. And you can even boost your posts and your ads. If you really want this particular post to reach more people, you can consider paying to boost it. And ads are similar. The one difference is that a boosted post will show up on your page's timeline, whereas an ad won't. It'll just go directly to people. And you can target these as well. So there are 3 basic options for targeting. People who like your page. You can do people who like your page and their friends. And you can target people with specific interests that you choose. So if you target people who like your page, that can get an important message to the followers you already have. For example, we need to hit this fundraising target, please donate. And then you boost that to make sure it gets to all those people. And you can target people by their interests to reach a particular audience and get new followers. So location is part of the targeting, and that's really important for campaigns. You don't want to waste money and hurt engagement by targeting people outside your district. Imagine that you end up targeting people from another state. They have no reason to click on your post, and you're not only wasting money, but you're hurting your engagement because Facebook is saying, not a lot of people are clicking on this. And you can set the age. It's usually 18 plus by default, so that's everyone voting age, but you can change that based on the post and based on your target audience. Say you're posting about Social Security or about tuition-free college, you might want to adjust the age range. You can target by interests, up to 10 interests, and just think about how many people you can afford to reach and how narrowly you want to target your message. If you cast too wide a net, you might not reach people who are most likely to engage. So just keep that in mind. So the bottom line on Facebook pages is that every campaign should have a Facebook page and someone who knows how to use it effectively. If you don't, then people will wonder, why not? There are also events on Facebook, which both pages and individuals can create. It's a cheap and easy way to invite people to an event. Make sure you have all the details in there. Post reminders on the event page. And remember, just don't rely solely on Facebook to turn people out for the event. Because if you have 100 RSVPs on Facebook, you're going to need to work really hard to get anywhere close to that number of people to actually show up. And then there are Facebook groups. So unlike pages, it's more of a free-for-all where anyone can post, but they can be really good for promoting discussion and sharing information. So if you're running a campaign in Illinois, if you have an Illinois Green Party Facebook group, post information about your campaign in there, and you're reaching your target audience for free, basically. And yeah, you can look for other groups that might be interested in info from your campaign too. Just think about the different issues that you're involved in, and ask people you know who are big Facebook activists. A lot of state parties have Facebook groups. Like I said, these are great places to share. And a tip is that if you are the admin of a campaign page, when you have a new post, you can prime the pump by sharing your post in a lot of green groups and like-minded groups. And that gets it in front of a lot of people right away. And in the whole Facebook algorithm, time is a factor. So the more shares that you start getting right away, the more likes and comments that you start getting right away, it gives it a real boost out the gate. And again, moderation. We want to make sure that the discourse is respectful, it's in line with the goals and principles of the Green Party. A lot of groups have green groups have guidelines at the top. So if you don't know how to moderate, take a look at those guidelines. And again, if there are people who are posting just to cause trouble, don't be afraid to just kick them out because they're poisoning it for everyone else. All right, so that covers Facebook. So Twitter is less widely used than Facebook, but it's still an essential tool in US politics. And in some ways, it's more of a platform to be part of the public conversation. For example, tweets from political parties and campaigns about hot issues are often in the news, and many journalists are on Twitter. This is sort of an understatement these days when, a single tweet from you-know-who can dominate the headlines for a week. So some basics about Twitter. So you have a Twitter handle, which starts with the @ symbol. And you have messages, which are known as tweets. And they are now 280 characters or less. And anyone who's following you will see your tweets on their timeline. So pictures don't take up your character limit, and you can actually post up to 4 pictures per tweet. So you can post links, and those will be shortened automatically. They do take up some of your characters. They sometimes include previews, and they sometimes don't. Sometimes you have to play around to get the tweet to look exactly like you want it to. And hashtags are important to use on Twitter. When you can, it's a good idea to use hashtags, whereas on Facebook, I would advise don't use hashtags most of the time. What a hashtag is, it's just a word or phrase. It begins with the hashtag or pound symbol. It's got no spaces or punctuation. It's a popular way of finding content based on a theme, like well-known hashtags like Black Lives Matter. The Jill Stein hashtag slogan was, "It's in our hands." So it's a good way to reach people with similar interests, because people will be searching for what's going on with this hashtag. And look for existing hashtags before you make up a new one. Because if everyone is tweeting on, no DAPL, and your hashtag is heck no to the Dakota Access Pipeline, they're not going to see your stuff. So use the existing hashtag to be part of that conversation. So you have to build a following, and there's less people on Twitter, so it can feel kind of lonely at first. But you can build a following, and for example, you can start by asking Twitter to search your contact list to find people you know. You can follow them. They're likely to follow you back. And you can include a link to your Twitter account on your website, and you can even go on Facebook to ask people to follow you on Twitter. And there's a growing network of Greens on Twitter. A lot of them are happy to follow other Greens. So you can look at existing accounts and their followers to find people who might be willing to follow you. So for example, you're running for mayor, look at your local Green Party's Twitter account, and chances are a lot of those people would be interested in following you. So start building a Twitter following, and before long, you will find yourself a community. And the great thing is when you follow these people, you start to learn all sorts of stuff from all over the internet. Lots of short and crunchy hits of information. So Facebook can punish you for posting too much, but Twitter doesn't do that. You can tweet as much as you want. And one thing that I like to do is you can put out 10 tweets in a day and take the most popular ones and then adapt them into Facebook posts. Don't do exactly the same thing. Like, for example, you might not want to use hashtags on Facebook, but you can take pretty much the same content and repurpose it into a Facebook post. The only punishment for tweeting a lot is that people might think it's too much and unfollow you. And you can share someone else's tweet, which is called retweeting. If someone with a large following retweets you, you can really reach a lot of new followers. It's often, not always, a show of agreements and respect, and it can build relationships. So if you follow a movement that you support, you can retweet their content, and chances are they'll see that, and they'll appreciate that you are building their message. And they might start following you back and retweeting you.
Can you explain the notation for how do you do, there's some special thing you do to retweet, right?
It's just a button to retweet, actually. And you can see right here, you've got a little circular arrow button, and that's how you retweet. Yeah, sure thing. So if you tweet and include someone's handle not at the very beginning, for example, in this example on the screen, that person will be notified that you mentioned them. It's called a mention. So this is a way of pulling other people into a public conversation. So you can reach influential tweeters. You can engage new people. If you start your tweet with a handle, you'll send a direct message to that person. And that can be another good way to start a conversation, but it's less public. And you'll see in your notifications who's mentioning you, who's retweeting you, who's favoriting or liking your tweets. So you can check your notifications to see who's trying to engage you in conversation and to find people who might be prospective followers. So if you don't really know what to tweet about, here's some ideas. Your positions on issues, especially hot or trending issues, videos, pictures, memes, event announcements, responses to current events, statements by politicians, breaking news. You know, a lot of Twitter is responding to what's going on right now. And action alerts, volunteer opportunities, quotes and memes that go along with your message, retweets, encouraging statements to like-minded people, campaigns and organizations. And if you have people tweeting their support for you, you can retweet that to show that people are supporting you.
So how do you manage, I mean, you've been kind of a one-person show in some respects, but like you have to have a committee to agree on what to tweet. If everybody has to agree on what to tweet, it's not going to be effective. So how do you recommend that be handled?
Yeah, so that's a good question. How do you decide what to tweet? Should it be a whole committee of people? Should it be one person? And that depends a lot on your resources and your capacity, and also just the skills of your particular team. I mean, do you have someone who is sort of a social media whiz, or is it kind of a new thing for you? Yeah, I would say sort of trust yourself and put yourself out there, but just be aware that especially on Twitter you can get yourself in trouble if you you know, if you jump in, you know, think about it and read it and reread. Even typos can get you in trouble on Twitter, and not just code thief, you know. So yeah, you know, as with social media in general, there's a balance to be struck between too little and too much. You know, how edgy do you want to be versus stepping over the line? And yeah, it's just you know, who do you trust? Is the candidate going to be the tweeter? Usually not. That's highly unlikely, but I guess it works for some campaigns. So yeah, just a couple of closing thoughts about social media. Again, it should not replace traditional organizing. But if you do it right, it can be a huge boost to your overall organizing efforts. So every campaign, in my opinion, should have a Facebook page, and consider having a Twitter account if you have the capacity to do so. And if you don't feel comfortable using social media, find a team member who can help. So think about the scale of your campaign, the resources you have before deciding how much time, energy, and money to invest in social media. And beware, it can be addictive. It can be a time suck. The last thing you want to do is have your candidate up all night tweeting. Having a volunteer staffer manage social media, especially someone who has experience and communication skills, can really help a lot, but make sure it's someone you know and trust. Because a lot of campaigns have gotten in big trouble because the person who they had on social media flew off the handle, and that can cause a big headache. Yeah, there it is. It can get people in trouble. Think before you post. Avoid posts that can be misunderstood. You don't want things that could offend your supporters and give ammo to your opponents. And this, unfortunately, is especially difficult on Twitter because you have to condense your messages, and it's hard to be nuanced. And social media, sadly, can be a platform for negativity and time-wasting debates. So don't get sucked into the negative aspects. Don't be discouraged by them either. There are people who basically live to fight with other people on social media, and don't let them make you as miserable as they are. So my final thoughts are just do what you can to make social media a more positive, welcoming, informative, and inspiring space. And I like to think a green approach to social media is to think of it as just one more tool to help build a bridge to the better world that we know is possible. All right. Thanks. So are there any questions about social media?
I just have a question about targeting. What are your thoughts on, you're looking for a specific audience, but again, you probably don't want to waste time on people that already agree with you. So like, what's your thought on like how much to target, and how much to press who you're targeting to kind of grow your base?
So I would push back on that. I think you absolutely want to target people who agree with you, because a lot of times that support is sort of passive, but you want to turn them into active supporters. So a lot of times you'll find, for example, your social media following may be a lot bigger than your email list. So it's like moving people up the ladder of engagement. And there's a lot more people out there who like the Green Party, who like, would like you as a candidate if they're introduced to you. So really all it takes is they see that post from you, maybe a promoted post that is reaching all the Green Party fans in your state. And they're like, oh, okay, great, there's a Green candidate. They become a follow of your page. Then you start posting things to get them to sign up on email. Then you're sending them emails to ask them to donate and ask them to volunteer. So, yeah, I think, to me, you absolutely want to target the people who agree with you. But again, it just comes down to your campaign strategy, where you're looking at who's your target audience, what's your win number, how many people do you need to persuade. But really, it's so important to find those people who agree with you, who are going to become supporters, who are going to become your volunteers and donors and team members. And typically, when you target, you still are reaching a large number of people. Most of them will just see your post and kind of move on, but maybe 1% or 2% will click on it. And that's how it works. And despite that, it's pretty affordable to target people in that way. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just worry, if you only get so many, when you boost a post, you only get so many out there. So are you missing an opportunity by, targeting the ones that already agree with you? But I get what you're saying, like it's important to bolster that support and grow them, but.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think, you know, I know a Green who always says that what campaigns come down to is mobilize your base and expand your base, right? So you need to do both. And, you know, when you are looking at your win number and your campaign strategy, you might put specific numbers on those targets. Yeah, so again, you can do both. And you can even target people who follow your page just to make sure that they get your message. Thinking those are your most passionate supporters, and you need to mobilize them to volunteer. But at the same time, you might be targeting people who, you know, say they like Noam Chomsky, because you're thinking, all right, well, these people know what's up with their book choices, so maybe some of them will sign on to like the campaign.
Okay, we got time for one more question, and then we got to move on to the next because we're running out of time here. So
real quick, I was out of the room when you're doing Facebook, so but I know Twitter better. So what's the analog of a hashtag in Facebook? If I wanted to target that group that's you're after, how would I get that post, attract that post in Facebook to some other group that is maybe not following me?
Yeah, that's kind of a tough question because, and it might be hard for me to describe, but Facebook and Twitter are different animals. Twitter is a huge free-for-all where, you know, even the lowliest tweeter with 0 followers can get into a flame war with the President of the United States. Whereas Facebook is much more algorithm-driven. And Facebook is doing a lot more to determine what gets shown to who. So on the one hand, on Facebook, you're talking more to your echo chamber, which can be good for mobilizing support. But it's harder on Facebook to break out of that. And that's also a reason why Twitter gets you in the news so much more. Because your tweet instantly goes to all the journalists who are following you. Like, holy crap, they're tweeting about a hot issue. This is a controversy. And it's all happening in real time.
So I'm just going to guess
you're just talking
Facebook probably supports hashtags, but nobody uses them because they don't you know.
Yeah, sorry. So I didn't really answer your question directly.
We had covered that while you were out, so sorry.
Facebook does support hashtags, actually. But the research shows that if people see hashtags on a Facebook post, they're less likely to share it. Because they're like, what the hell? This is Facebook. Don't use hashtags. And that's why don't use tweets as Facebook posts. Don't use Facebook posts as tweets. They're different animals. You can use similar content. But it always kills me when I see someone has a Twitter feed and it's just like Facebook links on their Twitter feed. Because it's like, these are enemies. It's like when you post a YouTube video on Facebook and they make it look all crappy because they don't want people clicking on YouTube videos. And that's something I didn't really cover well is video on Facebook. But basically, upload videos directly to Facebook, and you'll get these nice autoplay videos that are very attention-grabbing. And you can even live stream on Facebook. And again, that's very attention-grabbing. But yeah, just start using Facebook and Twitter, and you'll get a feel pretty quickly for what works and what doesn't. And you get feedback.
So we're just about at the end of our time. We're going to skip a couple of sessions. I'm going to, while Dave takes off his mics.
Thank you.
Thought he was going to escape here. And then we're going to scoot over to Campaign AI, but I'm going to take 15 seconds and go over additional resources. I came up with a whole bunch of them. When we email you out the links and everything, it'll be in there. Josh? So, did anybody get anything useful out of this today? All right. So, did anybody get everything they needed today done? Huh. So, maybe there's a need for something to kind of continue this on beyond this. Do you have a presentation that we should be taking a look at?
The LA one? Are we doing the alley? Are we skipping that?
Yeah. So there you go.
Hopefully it's on here.
Put that in one pocket. We'll put this in the other pocket. And pinch this here if I may.
All right, this will be quick.
Shove that there.
It's just a couple.
This is what I never use this way, but I usually use 42 monitors too. So.
If not, I can just talk about it
Oh, I see
briefly.
what the problem is. There we go. Okay, what'd you call it?
It should be Camping Ally, right?
Camping key.
I don't see it. I can just speak to it briefly. It's
Okay, I'll let you.
It's,
I'll go look for it, and you can speak to it in the meantime.
Sure. So I just wanted to talk briefly about the Campaign Ally program. So we decided a lot of times when you start off, it's your first campaign, first time running. You really don't have an idea like what your resources are, what you're able to do. So one of the ideas that we came up with is having a group of people who have a little bit of experience that can act as mentors or allies to a campaign and demonstrate some of the resources that the party has and can be a direct line. So basically what it would be is we have several members of the Wisconsin State Green Party who have volunteered to be part of this program. And what they will do is be embedded with each campaign so that they can speak to you about the state issues and likewise go to the state and be a voice for you in your campaign on getting resources from the state. Some of the things that they'll be able to help with is different types of volunteering, making sure everything's going smoothly, and anything that you need would be requested through them. I mean, you can still go to the state, but it'll just be easier to have a person who facilitates that type of communication. And I know like Dave said he would do that. Tomas, I think you agreed to be that, myself as well. So anyone who's interested in running a campaign would like to sign up and say, hey, I'd like an ally, please let us know. You can email me at wigpelections@gmail.com. I'll happily set that up. And another thing that I believe that we can help with is helping facilitate getting the endorsement, going through the steps with you, whether it's through a local chapter or through our state party. I don't know, is there any questions about the concept or how we're doing it? We're kind of piloting that now, and here's just a brief description on here. I don't know so, yep, just help them in a general sense, you know, and I think that is the biggest thing is just, you know, like, sometimes you have technical questions, I don't know. And we won't necessarily always have the answer either, but we'll provide some ideas. And moral support also I think is very important, being a hype man. And these are the charges. So the thing we were thinking about is we'll facilitate the endorsement process, have regular meetings, so the allies themselves too will come and say, hey, these are issues that our campaigns are having, and brainstorm. And say, hey, you know, your campaign's doing great on social media. Can you have suggestions for, you know, the congressional campaign I'm working on? And perhaps we'd have that. So that's it, briefly. Yeah, let's see. Yeah, communicate. I think we went over everything. Any questions? All right. Yep.
Just maybe highlighting the idea that we can do this. Somebody in La Crosse might be running, but we can still help you from Milwaukee with all the technology.
Definitely. One of our state senate candidates is way northwest, and it's hard for, you know, like a majority of our membership is going to be in places like Madison, southeast Wisconsin. But there's other ways that I think we'll be able to help. Well, obviously, if we have someone in that area that's willing to do that, we'll try and link them up. But still through The different medias, and I believe Dave talked about working remotely. We try to phone bank, help out that way, and, you know, telephone calls still work. Cool. All right, well, thank you, guys.
That's what you want to do. Any final closing comments and wrap it up for everybody here? Maybe with the mic if we're going to share this with the stream?
Sure. Can you back up, huh?
Exactly. Oh.
You could just do that calendar too. It's right in that design folder. You know, it just says like, just your spreadsheet.
Okay. So while you're hooking this up, and then I'll let you put this in here, I'm going to just quick show you one of the links that we're going to have in there is a spreadsheet that we have that actually lets you help map out your calendar. So one of the nice things that the Wisconsin Election Commission has is a list of all the key dates across the entire election cycle. They keep updating it each year. That will have in a link. And then there's also this nice tool in Google Docs and Google Spreadsheets that basically lets you build a Gantt chart if you're a real techie geek. But basically it lets you kind of show on a calendar across time when your deadlines are to make it easy to go through and follow and say, whoops, I got to get my quarterly filings in, and some of these other key dates along the way there, so that it makes a little bit as a planning tool. So that'll be coming in the email. On to Datsa.
All right, so thank you all very much for coming. Thank you all who have been watching via live stream. There will be emails going out. There will be this packet posted on the WisconsinGreenParty.org website. If you are not already a Green Party member, we have brochures out in back. You can certainly sign up today or go to your local Green Party meeting and sign up there. I'm excited about all of the Green candidates running, all of the people around the nation. It is an exciting time to be a Green Party member. And with that, eat some more food, take one of those runaway inequity books if you don't have one, and we'll see you on the email. Dave has something. Hold on.
Before Dave gets a chance, I want to thank our host today, the First Unitarian Society of Milwaukee. They've been providing a great venue for us. They worked through a lot of challenges with us and were very accommodating. And our video streamers were also pretty wonderful as well, too, including having some definite challenges along the way there that they've wrestled through, too. So they were really pushing a lot of the technology, and appreciate everybody from working on that there. So you can see that video at Wisconsin Video Hub. Take a look at that under Dan Folkman. Go ahead.
Thanks.
You got a mic on there,
I just
so
got
I'm not gonna
mics,
need to
so
talk
yeah.
anymore.
And I have a real quick announcement, which is that I've got good news and I've got bad news. The bad news is that it costs money to run a campaign school and democratize the knowledge that we need to take over our government. The good news is that you've got money in your pocket. And you know, seriously, we did strive to make this as free and accessible as possible. But we did have some expenses putting this campaign school on. So if you are able to contribute to help us cover our costs, we would greatly, greatly appreciate that. And again, you know, thanks so much, everyone, for coming. And want to give special shout-outs. I know I'm going to forget people, but at least folks in this room. Thanks, Damien, for all your work on this. And really, yeah. Thank you, Tom, for being a superhero and putting in way more time than you said you would. Thanks, Bruce. The food was amazing. Thanks again to Dan and team for doing the video and live streaming. And Greg, thank you for all that you've done. Again, the reason that we're eating this delicious food is largely thanks to this man over here. And fellow presenters, Josh, Tomas, Datsa. Yeah, so, pretty much everyone in this room. Oh, and Barb for holding it down. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, thank you, John, for the really clutch tech support today. All right. All right, cool, yeah, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, David, for heading up the project. Good job.
Yeah, we did it. All right, and yeah, I think, some of us are hanging out in Milwaukee tonight. If people have to go home, then that's understandable, but, you're very welcome to hang out. This isn't my home turf, so I don't know where we're going, but I know that there is like one of the world's only cooperative bars in Milwaukee, or at least America's only cooperative bars.
Unless you want to walk, like just down the block, there's an Irish pub just a block away.
I'm totally open.
Yeah. We just leave our cars where they are.
Awesome.
Concert for the vets or police up at the Quaker Center tonight. It's probably going on now.
Starts at 7.
Yeah.
7:30, something like that. Real nice place. All right. We're over. Woo-hoo. We're adjourned.
A wrap.
Entertaining motions to adjourn.
5 minutes early. We finished early. And we probably need a little bit of help cleaning up, right?